Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Leverage Your Podcast show. And today you're going to learn from one of the best. So Jen Trepic has, had her business in the health industry as a side gig, and then obviously it grew, wanted to podcast to make it even bigger. And she's involved in the podcast professional association. I always get it mixed up. Professional podcast professional. Anyways, she's involved in the industry and really helping the industry. And so I wanted you to really learn from her what success has been like, lessons along the way. So fun to chat with you in this way, Jen.
I'm so excited to sit with you, Lindsay. This is like, other worlds colliding
I
too.
know. It's so cool. So tell me a
Yeah.
little bit going back in the first stages. You're in hedge funds and doing
I
the
know.
wellness on this side. That seems like such a juxtaposition.
For sure. It was. But I think it's also part of what worked about it because they didn't necessarily require the same thought patterns.
True.
And so I wasn't totally exhausted. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. There were certain days where I was totally exhausted at the end of the day, but it wasn't like what I did during the day was exactly the same as what I was
Yeah.
doing nights and weekends. So I think that helps. But yeah, my background is business and marketing, and I came to all the wellness stuff through my own, I call it a saga of trying to figure out, my health and my weight. And I just feel like the word journey doesn't do it justice.
Yeah.
Um, but it was really like worlds collided for me because on the business side, I didn't really know what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I just knew that I couldn't work for somebody else for the rest of my life.
Mm.
Or maybe I should say I wouldn't work for somebody else for the
Yep.
rest of my life. And like I said, I didn't know what the thing was going to be. And then those worlds collided when I learned about the curriculum that I I ended up basing my entire practice on this curriculum, and it completely changed my life. And so I was like, okay, well, this is the thing that I'm going to do outside
Right.
of my full-time job with it, and the effort was potentially make extra money and invest it and eventually just be able to work for myself
Yeah.
and do the whole thing. So I built my practice health coaching on the side for 12 years,
Oh, wow.
longer than I had planned, but all's well, as things go. So I left my job July of 2019 and launched my podcast Salad with a Side of Fries in August of 2019.
Oh,
And like
wow.
many people who launch podcasts, it's like, well, we start to listen and then we go, well, I could do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Everyone else is doing
And
it. Let's just tag along.
right. Exactly. So I launched my podcast right after I left my full-time job, partly because I'd gotten into listening to podcasts and partly because I was like, well, I'm not used to having free time. So why not? This could be fun. Right. Like I didn't know what I was going to do with a lot of my time. And so I launched the podcast and I sort of describe it all as like throwing noodles at the wall and seeing what
Yep.
sticks. And
Not unlike
so,
other people that are launching. Like that's kind of, especially early days, right? When
exactly.
everything was still sort of new and it's not like there were any huge, gurus, so to speak, that were like, oh, here's the proven way to do it. We just kind of all made it up as we went along.
Well, and I did. I paid somebody to teach me how
Oh,
to do it.
nice.
So what ended up happening, and you'll appreciate this. So a couple months before I left my job, I knew I was going to be leaving, and I had this thing for, I want to do a podcast. I wasn't even entirely sure that it was going to be related to my health coaching practice.
Mm,
I was sort of like, oh, it could be a bunch of things, whatever. Um, and then eventually I was like, well, it kind of just makes sense to make it related to
yeah.
everything else I'm doing. But um, I had started down that rabbit hole myself of, okay, I know I'm going to need a mic. I know I need to like figure out how to record. And I had started, Google, YouTube, whatever. And it was like I was reading articles and reviews of microphones and all of the things. And I got to the point where I was like, I could spend the next
Oh God.
decade trying to figure out what mic to buy,
100%
or I could pay somebody to teach me what I need to know to do this.
smart.
And I did. I met somebody through networking, and turns out, he had actually helped a couple other shows launch. And so I worked with him. We got the show up in just a couple weeks because he was
Wow.
moving from New York. So we only met like a couple times to kind of get this going. But he taught me enough of what I needed to know to make it happen and start
Thank God.
publishing.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And the rest, as they say, is history, and we can kind of go through what's evolved with the
Yeah.
show since then. But I remember, so the show launched August of 2019. COVID was 2020.
Yeah.
So it was podcast movement. So I went to podcast movement in August of, was it 2021 or was it 20? No, they did it online. Sorry, my brain. They did it
Yeah.
online in
It's a blur,
2020.
those COVID years.
Right. So it was 2021. They didn't do evolutions. They did, the main podcast movement in August. So went in person to that. And Greg, the guy who taught me how to podcast, was there with somebody that he was working with to launch their show then. And he kept saying to me, I'm starting a network. I want to talk to you. Like, your show would be the first show that already exists that's joining the network.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, we'll talk. And then I was just sort of like, yeah, okay, maybe, like there wasn't, and I say this with all the love in the world, but there wasn't anything so compelling about joining the network, but I trusted him,
Yeah.
and he was saying, here's my vision. This is what I'm thinking. You don't have to make a decision yet because I'm not quite ready. Like, I want to get to
Fair
this
enough.
one other thing first anyway. So I was like, okay, fine. And then, as things moved along, then we did a panel together at Evolutions the following year. And we talked about, and like, one of the things I talked about on the panel was like saying no to networks if it doesn't work for you. There are other ways to grow your
Yeah.
show beyond, joining this network. And at that point, I had had conversations with a couple other networks as well, but it was kind of funny. We're sitting next to each other on this
It's like,
panel, and I'm like, that guy, right?
brutal.
But yeah, but I eventually rebranded my entire health coaching practice to
Mm.
Salad with a Side of Fries, the podcast branding, because it was just much more current and much more compelling,
Yeah.
and was the way better brand than the one that I created in 2007,
Well, it's setting yourself apart, right? Like it's
Right.
people get it and it's like hooky. So let's talk about when you launched it because like I love your little mic. I forget what they're called, your little
Thank
mic
you. Yeah, the
thing.
little flag.
Yes.
This is probably gonna make a gross sound as I move it up so everybody can see the whole thing, but there
I
you
know.
go.
It's so slick.
Yeah.
And yeah, like your website, the
That too can be
branding.
yours. It's a whopping $35 from someplace on the internet. Yeah.
I know. And you have you've got merch, you've got
I
like all the
do.
things.
Yes.
I'm like, oh my God. So many questions. So when you were branding,
Mhm.
like, was that your vision or did it just
No.
organically change over time?
So Salad with a Side of Fries as the name was became the name of the show because it's legitimately my go-to meal. And I was at one point I was going to call the show French fries and cookie dough because those are two foods that I will never give up. But but as we talk about with our clients in the podcast space, that didn't really help people know what they were going to get when they
Yeah.
clicked play. And thank goodness for Greg and some great guidance, So we landed on Salad with a Side of Fries as the name of the show. And even when, created the name of the show, the graphic designers that we worked with created the art, merch still wasn't on my mind.
No.
All of those little things. You're like, yeah, maybe one day, whatever, I'll figure that out.
Yeah. You don't think that
Literally,
far ahead.
Right. And literally when I was getting it off the ground, I didn't even add the podcast to my website. I had a separate, no, I did a separate website
Hmm.
that was salad with a side of fries that I had somebody on Fiverr slap together because I was like, oh, the podcast needs a website. I mean, it was so like piecemeal, but I was
Hmm.
throwing it together. I didn't have it well connected to my business, even
Yes.
though it was in the content piece. It wasn't in the strategy, if
Right.
that makes sense.
It totally makes sense because I find a lot of people think as the podcast as this separate entity, this silo, not that it has to be matchy to your business, but it has to go. It has to be like a cohesive ecosystem. So it's so great that you knew that instinctively fairly early on.
Right. And so what ended up happening was, and like I said, part of it with the show was just throwing noodles at the wall and seeing what was going to happen with it. And then when I realized, okay, this is going to be a thing, and people are listening who are not just people I know,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that I was like, okay, there's something here. And this is continuing to evolve. And as I think about what I offer people as a health coach and that old proverbial marketing funnel, which I'm
Hmm.
not the biggest fan of funnels in general, but if we think about it in that way, the podcast was the top of the funnel. It was the
100%.
free entry point into this ecosystem of who I am, what I do, how I approach these things. And then I realized so I had this top of funnel thing, and then I had this relatively high ticket piece
Mm.
of one on one or group coaching that I did with my clients.
Yep.
And I was like, right
It's
now
a
we
it's
need
a
something
common
in the
issue.
middle.
Yeah, you're
Right.
like, how do I bridge that gap?
Exactly. And so I decided to launch a membership for the podcast. Right. And for people who are less familiar, like think of it like a Patreon, but more value
Mhm.
add for the listener or the subscriber than the buy me a coffee
Yeah.
kind of Patreon, right? Because again, thinking about what I do, what's something that somebody would be willing to like pay up a little more for? And I didn't also want to create a ton of extra work for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do more episodes. I didn't want to do all of these extra
Build a
things.
thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So I built the membership that was fundamentally based on giving them kind of a step up. It was just added tools
And they get a
each
taste of
week.
you, so to speak.
Exactly. So they got um, a recipe every week,
Perfect.
a quarterly live Q&A. Sometimes that was a group, sometimes that was a one-on-one. Um, extra discounts, curated content. So if I found an article that I thought was particularly great or talked more about something that we were talking about or was talking about something that we hadn't talked at all about, but was great research or great content, I would send it to the members. So it created a little bit of extra value for the people who wanted that next step, who wanted that extra support, but maybe weren't willing to pay up for that coaching piece.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of still been that stair step for people,
Yeah. And
and I've
recurring revenue for
evolved.
you.
Right, right. And I've evolved that membership, over the years. Um, but it's still relatively basic, so to say, and
Sometimes things don't have to be complicated though, you know?
the other thing is it can still work even if it's not 800,000 people who have opted
Yes.
in or subscribed to
Yeah.
it. And I think that's part of the pressure and the misnomer when we get into
Uh-huh.
this space, especially in the industry. Like I was leading a workshop kind of for Simplecast, which is, under the SiriusXM umbrella. And so many people were asking like, okay, like I'm supposed to monetize. I'm supposed to, have this many downloads, but I don't have that many downloads. And one of the things that we always come back to is like, well, why did you start your show? If you started your show because you enjoy having these conversations and you have a full-time job and this isn't going to be, or you don't need it to be your revenue,
Yeah, yeah.
your income, like let all the rest of that go.
There's so much
You
pressure
know,
to like
yeah.
be the thing and like be well known and the downloads and
Right.
everyone asks like, oh yeah, how are you monetizing? What are your sponsorships? Do you have ads? And if you say no, you're like, you feel like you're a complete idiot. Like, but it's
Right.
like,
Well, but
don't
again,
feel
like,
that way.
yeah, and come back to why you started
Yeah.
your show. If you started your show because you wanted something, a place to talk, great. It serves that purpose,
Hmm.
whether anybody else is listening or not. And for me, it ultimately evolved into these pieces of revenue generation that are additional streams of income for what I do. But I didn't necessarily have all of that thought out at the jump. And I think that's
Yeah,
okay too.
I agree. And you
Yeah.
can't figure it all out before your launch, or honestly, you're never going to freaking launch.
Right.
Like, at
Right.
least to me, I'm like, have the strategy so that you know your why, you have a promotion plan, how are you going to get some visibility? How are you going to tie it into your business? So you need to have some of the fundamentals, but I don't think you need to have all the nitty gritty figured out.
Yep. Exactly.
So when did you feel like, okay, this is going well? Like I'm becoming successful with my podcast. Like what was the benchmark for you where you sort of felt like you're not climbing up all the time?
I don't know. I mean, certainly by the end of 2019, when the listenership was growing, the downloads were growing. And again, it was, wait a minute, there's people listening who I don't know,
Feels so good,
you
doesn't
know?
it?
Right. And I can't remember when it was. Someone commented, oh, I know what it was. Somebody took the trouble to send me an email. I think this was like early 2020, toward the Q1 2020. Somebody
Mhm.
sent me an email um in response to something that I had posted. And it was like, I have a hater. Like, I'm big enough to have a hater. Like, I'm finding the people who aren't for me, which
Yeah, yeah,
means,
which is just as great.
well, right, because it means that it's in front of people who can potentially say this is the right listen for me.
Mhm.
It was like,
It's putting a line
and
in
I
the
was like,
sand.
right. And I remember being like, oh my goodness, this person thought it was worth their time and energy to send me this email. Like,
I know.
cool.
Yeah, you're like, where are the freaking love
Okay.
letters?
Right. But it was one of those where, like, wait, if somebody who this is not for has found it,
Hmm.
imagine how many people who have found it who it is for.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, a big thing. So I added ads based on affiliate relationships that I had in my
Perfect.
practice already. So I added those January of 2020. And I added the membership basically at the same time.
You got a lot done in a short amount of time
I
from like
did.
August to January.
I know.
Wow.
And then, but again, that was a time I left my full time job. I was
Mhm.
used to being busy, right? And I was like, I'm going to figure this thing out, you know? So then things started to evolve, certainly more slowly. And from there, then it was like, okay, now I need to redo this website and make sure all these pieces fit together. I got my trademark in 2020.
Oh,
I'm trying to think. I actually even think I got the trademark in 2020, and I don't think I redid the website till like 2021. I mean, it got to the point where it was like, okay, we need to not have these things in separate websites, you know?
yes. And
And
so
that
for
was
the
when I
audience,
rebranded everything into
yeah,
Salad with a Side
so
of
it's more
Fries.
cohesive. So
Yeah.
just for the audience, so that they understand, why not have them in separate places? How would you answer that?
It becomes a function again of like creating one experience for that person, right? How many different places and things do we want them to go to? And if they
Mm,
even take that step to go find out more, we're leaving something on the table if that step doesn't give them all of the things that are available to them.
mhm.
So, and then there's also a piece of confusion that's created when even if I had this website that was branded Better Life Now, because that was my old,
Mm,
my old LLC, right? So it had the Better Life Now branding on a website. And then the other one for the podcast was Salad with a Side of Fries.
yeah,
Even if I linked them to each other
it's still
in a
confusing.
certain spot, it was a confusing experience for the listener and potential customer, potential client. And so I was really doing myself a disservice as much
Yeah,
as I was doing them a
yeah,
disservice in giving them the things that they're seeking out in as few steps as possible.
yeah, absolutely. So in your podcast, did you have like call to actions at the end? Do you do your own ad reads for your own membership, or like talk to me
Yes.
about how you led listeners to leads, if you will, for lack of better terms.
Yes. So one of the best pieces of advice. So I did kind of a bonus episode to launch the membership.
Mm,
So standalone, tell people about it. And then at some point in each episode, in the beginning, I did it when it kind of fit with what we were talking about. I would mention what our members are getting.
mm,
And then I went back. The person who had started the company that I was using for the memberships had made a recommendation of like, follow up with me. Like, let's see how this goes. Follow up with me in like a few months and let's see how it's doing and we can tweak it. And I actually did. I sent her a message and say, hey, I'd love to take you up on that. Here's what's happening. And so she gave me a couple of suggestions, one of which was to move the member promo, but also telling the members what they were getting to earlier in the episode. So it's
yeah.
now, and since then it's been in this. So I introduced the show, I introduced myself, the topic of the episode. If there's a guest in that episode, I introduce them. And then I tell our members what they're getting this week, and I tell every listener about the membership and how to opt
Mm,
in. And then I start with the actual content.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it does create a little bit more preamble, if
Longer
you
lead in.
will,
Yeah.
but it helps ensure that people are getting that information, even if they're not listening all
Yeah.
the way through. Then at the end of the episode, in part of my wrap up, I mention again what the members are getting that week. And then my big calls to action are really about connecting with me,
Yeah.
sending me messages, the website, social media. I even tell them what to send me, right?
Oh,
Send me your ideas, your questions, your takeaways. Because people need that prompt.
they do.
Um,
That's a
and
great
then
insight because not a lot of
yeah,
people, and I struggle with it and always like forget about it, is like engaging with the audience. It's so easy to
yes.
be like, oh, hi, everyone. And then like, that's it, right? Versus like, hey, you one listener, like, do this. Like,
So it's interesting you
yeah.
say that because I used to open the episode saying, hey, friends, plural. And I can't remember how long ago it was, but I now say, hi, friend.
Mm.
We think of it as one to many,
Yeah,
but they experience it as one to one.
totally.
You are in their ear. When they are listening, it is you and them, just that one person.
So true.
So I welcome, hi, friend, singular. Welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host and health coach, Jen Trepick. Here's another thing that drives me nuts. Not that you asked. Say your name, introduce yourself. Do not assume that somebody tuning into your show
Hmm.
knows who you are.
True,
I
true.
do a lot of podcast guesting. I can't tell you how many times I want to know how to pronounce their name. And there is no indication in listening to their episodes how to pronounce
Oh,
their name
now you have me get, I don't think I
because
do
they
that then, do
never
I?
say their own name. Well, I mean, Lindsay, no offense, your name isn't that hard. But, right, like I know how to say Lindsay Phillips from reading it.
Yeah.
But what if you pronounce it? Or, by the way, going to the podcast guesting thing, if you're pitching yourself to be a guest and their show says, Lindsay Phillips, but every time you open the show and you introduce yourself as Linz, well,
Yeah.
now you know when they address, hey, Lindsay, they've never actually listened to your show because you don't call yourself Lindsay.
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
Now, there's a lot of shows, like I said, where the host never even says their own name,
No, that's true.
but it's little things that bring a new listener into your show
Yeah.
with every episode.
And just getting that connection.
Right.
I know. So many little nuances, right? That you don't, when you start out, you don't think of all these things.
Right.
And it's like I've been podcasting for years. And like there's still like that, like things that I'm on autopilot because I've done it so much. And then I forget sometimes those little things. And it's like they do
Right.
make a difference.
And again, if your objective is to have the listeners that you have and you're good with that, like, cool, ignore what I just said. But if you're looking to grow an audience and you want people who listen for the first time to come back,
Hmm.
how do we make sure that every opening of every show is as much for the new person as it is for the person who's been listening to you, since the dawn?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Sorry, that was a total
again,
tangent.
no, it's good because you're thinking about not just you as the host and you growing the show and so forth and creating great content, but you also need to think about it from the eyes and ears of the listener and what is their experience. A, that's going to attract new listeners, but also B, to have them come back.
Right. And even in the concept of content, I can't even tell you how many people I meet who are obsessed with their content, right? We think that we all have great content.
Mm-hmm.
And if, again, going back to if your objective is to share the conversation that you want to share and it doesn't matter to you if anyone's listening, rock on. Enjoy every second of it. But if you're looking to grow and the audience isn't growing, 9 times out of 10, the issue is the content. So if we want to think about that from the listener's perspective, what are they
Yes.
going to experience as great content? For example, how many shows have two hosts? How much time do they spend? Can I swear?
Yeah.
Shooting the shit. Not that that was so bad, but how much time do they spend shooting the shit together
Yes.
before they get to whatever the episode is about? And have
100%.
they introduced themselves? Are you invited into that conversation, or are you a fly on the wall for this conversation? Is it enjoyable? Sometimes there are certain hosts where it is. And then there are certain hosts where they're having, this came up, I was at a different podcast movement. I was giving a talk and this came up as a question. It was these two guys and they were saying like, we've been friends forever and we have this show and da da da. And one of the things was like, you guys know each other.
Mhm.
You can pick up, at a second,
Yeah.
but your listener doesn't know you for that long.
No.
How do we bring the listener into that conversation that's just the two of you? So
Yeah.
is it,
Instead of
especially if it's
feeling like
catching
you don't
up
want
on
the audience,
stuff, or right?
yeah, you don't want the audience feeling like they're not in on an inside joke. Like you're just like,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, that's so true. So how did the podcast impact your business as you started to implement and tweak your strategies?
Yeah, it's become so, like I said, so it became the top of that
Mhm.
funnel. And then it added these other revenue streams. So the membership, merch, um, what else? I think one of the interesting things too is also that I started to talk about the membership outside of just the podcast. I started to promote the membership on social media and other things because then instead of thinking of it as this revenue stream for the podcast,
Yes.
thinking about it as part of that funnel
Yeah.
in the ecosystem, it was an offering that helped people take one more step
Yeah.
into my world. So that was a big shift from where
100%.
it started. Um, and the ads. So then over the last year, maybe not even 6 months, um, focusing on partnerships as opposed to the affiliate ads that I
Yeah,
had
yeah.
before. And that's been tremendous.
Yeah.
And then I just launched a book that's
Ooh.
also sort of content in, kind of another form. So a different audience. Like there are some people who are listeners, there are some people who are
Yes.
readers. Even some people who are listeners enjoy reading too. So it's it's overlap and new people. Um, but the piece, the overarching theme of everything I do is in the mission of what I do is to change the state of healthcare by empowering individuals to reclaim their health.
Yeah.
So all of these to me are ways that I can deliver that.
Yeah. You've got a core mission.
Exactly. And so even the partners that I'm willing to work with,
Yeah.
they have to fit in somewhere. It has to
Yeah.
be on brand for me and a genuine partnership that makes sense. So those have built revenue streams. And ultimately, what I think about it now is that there's a content monetization piece that is the book, that
Yeah.
is the partnerships, rather than sort of just the coaching or the products, that I offer in my health coaching practice.
Mhm.
So it all fits into these pieces. And I think it's funny because it can take a long time for those things to grow. And
Yeah.
the other side of it is like, I'll be totally, merch does not make much money, but it's fun. I enjoy it. I like
Totally.
having it for me. And once the website is built, it doesn't cost me anything to leave it there.
But even from a credibility standpoint, Jen, like when someone
Right.
goes to your website and there's your podcast, your membership, this, that, and the other, and there's like a merch, tab, people automatically are like, damn, like she's got merch. Like it has that certain, ooh, like allure of status and like where you're at and success.
Yeah. And it's fun. I like it.
Yeah,
Right.
it's super cute.
Yeah.
I
So
do love that.
it's fun.
Um,
Yeah.
so looking back, what would you say you wish you knew back then? Or it's like, oh, why didn't I do that sooner?
I wish I had started the sponsorship process and whole conversation sooner because you don't have to have a bajillion downloads to have those relationships. But I will say, we all only have so much bandwidth.
I know.
And so for a while, the sponsorships thing was the thing that I wanted to do that just was never making it to the top of my to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the things, like I said to you, I hired somebody to teach me how to do this. I am a big fan of working with and learning from people who have already done it to shorten my learning curve.
Heck yeah.
So in every single thing I've done, I have asked, who did you use? What did you do? Paid somebody for the coaching, the consulting, the guidance, whatever it is, to take that next step with a little bit more information so that my learning curve was shorter because somebody else
Yes.
had figured out a few things first.
And then you're going to see
So
results faster and take action
exactly.
faster.
Exactly. And so that for me was a major. I had prioritized the sponsorship piece earlier with people who this is what they're best at and let them do the thing they're best at.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't,
Yeah.
there's so many moving pieces when it comes to podcasting. You can't figure it all out on your own. And if
Right.
you do, like you said, you're throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping it sticks and you're testing. And it's good to test, but if you can like cut to the chase and fast track your implementation and results, heck yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
who are some of your go-to resources besides, of course, the PPA?
Yes. Well, I was going to say a lot of my resources are through
Yes.
the PPA, which is the Podcast Professionals Association. So, fill everybody in. I'm co-founder of the Podcast Professionals Association, which is the industry's only nonprofit trade association. So 501c6 nonprofit trade association for podcast service professionals. So what that means is everybody who serves hosts and creators. So think, marketers, editors, engineers, strategists, I'm trying to
So
think who
many.
else we have
I
PR
know.
agencies. We have a company that helps podcasters write books. We have podcast tech people, really runs the
Yeah.
gamut. But if your clients are podcasters, you potentially qualify for the Podcast Professionals Association. And so definitely those people are tremendous resources. And I tend to jump in with both feet
I love
to
that.
anything I do. And so even with the various podcast industry conferences and happy hours and different things, it's who can you meet? Networking can get sort of a weird vibe, and but there are a few things more powerful than meeting people and building relationships and having conversations and having
Yeah.
community. And
And
that has
podcasting
been
people are so just community oriented and caring. It's not starchy. Like,
so it's
I-
interesting you say
it's
that.
nice.
I was having a consulting conversation with somebody who he runs a consumer packaged goods incubator for startups. And he has a podcast. And we were talking about growth strategies. And I talked about collaboration with other shows and people in his space. And he was like, oh no, there are competitors.
Oh,
And I was like, I said, you're thinking as a consumer packaged good company or a startup incubator
yeah.
instead of thinking like a podcast creator.
Yes.
In the podcasting space, we all lock arms.
Yeah.
This is 1,000% a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
Because who do you know who only listens to one podcast?
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody recommends a different one, they go, oh no, I've got my one. Like no one.
No.
Right? Like people have capacity to listen to multiple podcasts.
Yeah. And refer your
And
friends or guests that you have to other shows, and like maybe they can have great synergy and create partnerships, or they're going to make a great episode together, even if that's the only thing they do. It's like we're all
exactly.
human. We all want connections and to help each other out. It's like, yeah, I've never seen anything like it. And I think that's why I've submersed myself into the business side of podcasting so much.
Exactly. I mean, it's one of the most incredible communities of people and people who are so open and friendly and willing to share that, like, when someone's not, that's when I'm like, huh, like, I don't know that you're going to be here for long, right? Or it's like, what's going on with you that this is your approach?
Mhm.
And again, I see that with people who identify as a different industry. They identify as
Yes.
advertisers. They identify
Yes.
as a
Cutthroat,
brand. They
competitive.
identify as, right. But if somebody identifies in the creative podcast space,
Yeah.
editor, engineer, marketer, strategist, host, all of those, there is so much collaboration.
Yeah. And there's enough work for everyone. I mean, there's people in the PPA that do the same thing, and we're all divulging what's going on in the back end, or how can I help?
Exactly.
Or, yeah, I'm a firm believer that there's no true competitors. We're all different people serving different people in different ways. And yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Because again, like my best client is probably not the next person's best client. And those people, all of those people exist. And I
yeah.
don't want to work with people who I don't want to work with. So I'm glad that this
No.
person wants to work with them.
Yeah. 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah. Are there any plans that you have for changing up the podcast or your business? Or, I mean, you said you've got the book right now.
Yes. So the book just launched. So as we're
Ooh.
recording, it was like 2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So it's called Uncomplicating Wellness.
Ooh,
And so working on, still that launch, some live events and things like
yeah,
that connected to the book and signings. The audiobook will be next. So that's, kind of
fun.
figuring those things out. But again,
Yeah.
it's, you know, the end of the book leads people to the podcast. The
Yes.
podcast leads people to the book.
Yep.
The website does to, all of those pieces. So it all
Intertwined.
fits together.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love it. And are you going to record your voice on the audiobook?
I am. I
Good,
am.
because you have like such a
Yes.
rich like radio voice. I
Thank
friggin'
you.
love it.
It's funny when I started the podcast, people were like, "You should do audiobooks." And I was like, "Really? Maybe." Growing up, somebody I knew from growing up is an audiobook producer.
Oh,
I reached out to her. I was like, "Jamie, people are telling me this. What do I need to know?" And she was like, "Okay, here's how you start. By the way, do you want to do like a coaching session?" And I was like, "Yes, please." She did a session with me. I was like, "Nope, not doing this." This was like it was a painful
oh,
hour to me. And I was like, okay, no,
okay. Now you
no
know.
thanks. But I will do my own.
Yes. Because you're passionate, and your passion, I think, will come through in the
Yeah.
way that you talk about it and your inflections and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm glad that is going to be
Well,
you.
thank you. Yeah.
So, how do
Thanks.
people find your book before we go?
Yes. Well, Amazon, all places books are sold, or my
Mhm.
website, a salad with a side of fries.com.
Love it. I know this was longer than half an hour, but it was such a good
I know.
conversation. And I love hearing about your journey and sharing some tips to the listener out there. That's you. So I hope you found some little golden nuggets on how you can improve your podcast. And, or if you haven't launched a podcast yet, then maybe it's time and you can take Jen's story and make that your reality as well. So thank you so much for a great conversation. And I'll, of course, see you at the next PPA meeting.
Yes. Thanks, Lindsay. Loved it.
All right. Take care, guys. All right. And I will see you in a couple of weeks on the Leverage Your Podcast show. Make it a great one. Bye.